Hi there, and welcome to O'Driscoll's Biopsych Review. So we're going into our second exam now, and we need to, catch up with life and figure out what's going on exactly in this latter part of our lesson. So we're going to go through a few things today. Updated neuronal conduction, synaptic transmission, and neurotransmitters. The anatomy of the brain and spinal cord, and brain imaging techniques, as well as the visual system. So that's a lot we have to cover today. So I'd like to get us started on the nervous system. Okay? We're just going to go really quick just to get it in your mind, get that stuff flowing, and then we're going to head right over to neurotransmitters. Okay, so in the nervous system, we have the central nervous system, which is the skull and the spine. And then in the peripheral nervous system, we have the autonomic nervous system, which regulates the internal environment, and the somatic nervous system, which regulates the external environment. And the autonomic nervous system has the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. So we're going to come back to that. That's just really important basics, so I wanted to get that all established. Alrighty, so what we're going to do first is discuss neurotransmitters, as I said before. Okay, so neurons are the cells of the nervous system. They work electrochemical signals. So let's start. We have exocytosis, which is the neurotransmitter is released, okay? That happens by this process. Calcium, positively charged calcium ions flood in, and then synaptic vesicles fuse with presynaptic membrane and dump all the neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft. So we have small neurotransmitters, we have large neurotransmitters, small molecule neurotransmitters and large molecule neurotransmitters. So let's first discuss small neurotransmitters, okay? We have the amino acids, we have the monoamines, we have the unconventional neurotransmitters, and then acetylcholine, which is in a category all to itself. So, and then our large large molecules are neuropeptides. And when these are being released in exocytosis, the small neurotransmitters pulse quickly. The large molecules, which are neuropeptides, those are large molecule neurotransmitters, are gradually released over time. Okay, so something just to establish before we go into description of neurotransmitters is neurons are the cells of the nervous system, and they bind to receptors. A receptor can only have one neuron bound to it at a time. They have to match with the receptor, so they have to have some kind of compatibility. So neuron is a ligand. You can think of it as like neuron is a girlfriend, and it's the ligand of the receptor, which is the boyfriend and not dependent, therefore not a ligand. Okay, so we're going to go into a discussion of these small neurotransmitters. So we have amino acids, monoamines, and acetylcholine. Okay, so here are the amino acids that we're concerned with are glutamate, aspartate, glycine, and GABA. Glutamate is the excitatory neurotransmitter, while GABA is the inhibitory transmitter, dealing with sleep, etc. So yeah, monoamines, we have two categories. We have catecholine and indolamine, and catecholine has triacine. And the way you can remember triacine is that it deals with dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, which all end in ine, like tyrosine. And then For serotonin, which is an indolamine, they use like tryptophan. So let's talk about the catecholine monoamines. We have dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. Epinephrine and norepinephrine are basically, it's adrenaline, and they had to change it because someone patented the name adrenaline. So just to take you back now to the sympathetic nervous system, which is a part of the PNS, the SNS deals with mobilizing and organizing, stimulating cells. So it's oh no, yeah, okay. But it's part of the sympathetic nervous system because it has sympathetic nerves that stimulate, organize, and mobilize energy resources in threatening situations, which we know that's what you do with adrenaline, fight or flight. So that's pretty basic. Dopamine, too much dopamine can cause schizophrenia. Not enough can cause Parkinson's. And you have to know that it deals with the substantia nigra, and we'll get back to why that is so. Okay, and then the indolamine is serotonin. It deals with like happiness. So then we have acetylcholine, which is our category of its own, and that deals with resting your muscles. Okay, it contracts your muscles so that you can rest. Too much acetylcholine can cause paralysis, and this is part of the parasympathetic nervous system because that deals with like resting, regrouping, relaxing. You can think paralyze, acetylcholine, parasympathetic nervous system, paralysis. So also something that's interesting that we must take note of is that there are drugs and toxins that act by mimicking or blocking neurotransmitters. Okay, one of those drugs is curare, and it's actually used in small doses, believe it or not, during surgery, but because it stops respiration, someone needs to be hooked up to like an artificial breathing thing. But these Indian men would dip in the Amazon, would dip their darts into the curare, and then they would shoot the dart at an animal, and it would paralyze the animal. So that's pretty interesting. Now, for unconventional neurotransmitters, we have the soluble gases, which is like carbon monoxide, nitrous oxide, I believe. Okay. So yeah. Now just to go over to that. Okay. And then large molecules, we have neuropeptides, and they have many functions. There's the gut, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary, and then the opoids. So we're gonna go into this in more organized detail right now. So just to review, small molecule neurotransmitters are amino acids, and that's glutamate, aspartate, glycine, GABA. Glutamate is the excitatory, GABA is the inhibitory. Then with monoamines, we have catecholamines, which are dopamine and adrenaline, which is norepinephrine and epinephrine, and they are structured with triacine. And then we have indolamine, which deals with serotonin. And all of these are associated with the sympathetic nervous system, which is associated with arousal. So we also have acetylcholine, which is, like I said before, in a category all of its own. And it's involved with the parasympathetic nervous system, which deals with relaxation, because acetylcholine deals with contracting muscles and resting. Unconventional neurotransmitters, also small molecule. We have soluble gas, which is nitric oxide and carbon monoxide, and these can get through lipids because they're gas and they don't need a receptor. So endocannabinoids, that's anandamide, and that's just like THC. Large molecule neurotransmitters, neuropeptides, endorphins, cholecystokinin, and vasopressin. So once again, just talking about monoamines, which is involved with arousal in the sympathetic nervous system, we have dopamine, which is a catecholamine, and not enough dopamine results in Parkinson's. Too much dopamine results in schizophrenia. Now, as we were discussing how drugs and toxins can often mimic or block neurotransmitter, it's important to note two things: curare and tetanus. Okay, curare blocks acetylcholine, leading to paralysis, disabled prey, but it's also a muscle relaxant, so it was used in some surgery, and that's dealing with the parasympathetic system. Then for tetanus, tetanus actually blocks GABA. So you can think of tetanus as lockjaw, and it's an inhibitory small amino acid. Remember the picture of that guy arching his back, laying on the ground, spasming. There's 100 cases per year in the US, and 1 million deaths worldwide. Interestingly enough, curare is sometimes used to treat tetanus, lockjaw. So that's pretty interesting. So we've pretty much covered the neurotransmitter. And I think it would behoove us to now go to, what do you think it's going to be? It's definitely going to be the central nervous system and the somatic nervous system. Okay? So let's get into that. Alrighty. So the nervous system is supported by several structures. The nervous system is comprised of the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system. So let's just go overall of the nervous system. It's supported by a lot of structures: the skull, meninges, and cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, so for brain protection, we have the skull, and then we have meninges, which is lining, and that lining is really great. It is the dura mater, the arachnoid membrane, and the pia mater. And so yeah, and then we have cerebrospinal fluid, which is really, really, really important. But we won't get into that until we talk about the central nervous system. I suppose we can talk about the central nervous system first, but no. So also some just interesting, well, with the cerebrospinal fluid, I'll just explain that really quickly. So it's produced by the choroid plexus, continuously produced from blood plasma. It's high in salt. It cushions the brain and spinal cord against impact. Let's see. It's the dural sinuses. Well, hang on. Okay. High concentration of salts. It gets rid of waste from the brain, waste such as excess neurotransmitter. It fills the subarachnoid space. Well, it circulates around the brain in the subarachnoid space, and then it fills ventricles and the central canal of the spinal cord. Okay, so dural sinuses are blood-filled spaces that run through the dura mater and drain into the jugular veins of the neck. So you can think of dura mater, dural sinuses, and the dural sinuses absorb excess cerebrospinal fluid. So your brain is, the choroid plexus is constantly producing cerebrospinal fluid over, and your dural sinuses are absorbing it, taking it through the dura mater, and then draining it into the jugular veins of the neck. So cerebrospinal fluid is great because it cushions your brain and protects, everything. Now, the only problem with cerebrospinal fluid is that too much causes hydrocephalus. This is often seen in children. Let's see what we can tell you about hydrocephalus.